There was nothing else at all in the whole world but football.
Hey guys, Simon here from the Triple F. Hope you're all doing well. I was joined by Tony this week and we played a little game called the Fictional Football Fan Club, although I did refer to it as the Football Fictional Fan Club. So yeah, apologies if I've confused you there. And I'd also like to make an apology because Tony, unfortunately, I'm sure I know exactly why he made the mistake. I think it's because we mentioned 1984. He referred to 1860 Munich as 1864, so apologies for that. Apologies to 1860 Munich for essentially erasing 4 years out of their history and making them 4 years younger. Apologies for that, but yeah, it is what it is and it happened. And I would like to make an apology to Forest Green Rovers because I claimed that their new stadium is made of wood and grass, which is wrong because stadiums technically, although they have a grass pitch, the pitch isn't really the stadium. So to say a stadium is made of wood and grass is a bit odd. And that stadium that I'm referring to, Eco Park, isn't even ready yet. It's just in development. So it is just a stadium that is not quite ready yet, but it will be hopefully in the next few years. So yeah, if there's anybody looking at that and looking at those mistakes that we made, apologies for the annoyance and the yeah, it is what it is, and these things happen. We're only human, guys. Anyway, hope you're all well. Take care. Thanks again, and hope you enjoy the chat. Bye bye. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Tony, but for some reason I have a feeling that you're an English teacher.
I've been teaching for over 30 years, so I've taught anything that comes under the umbrella of English, but mostly GCSEs at the moment.
Yeah, and what type of English? Is it English lit or just all sorts of...
It's just a language. So basically, David Cameron's government brought in a thing that if any kids come to college, I work at a college, an FE college, so I'm teaching mostly 16 to 19s. I teach a few mature students as well. But if anybody leaves school without, it used to be a grade D, but it's now been rebranded as a grade C for a pass, which has now been rebranded as a grade 4. So if anybody comes to our college and they haven't passed English and or maths, then they have to very reluctantly come and do 3 hours of English with me on the basis that if they upgrade, they've got more chance of university places, apprenticeships and jobs when they finally leave the college a couple of years on. So we get people who already hate English because they've failed it once and don't particularly feel they've got an affinity for it. But we've got to get, to be fair, most young people see the purpose, so that they give it another chance and it's giving them better prospects for the future. But I do get some very reluctant students in my classroom. Yeah, I've taught literature, I've taught everything from beginners to A-level over the 3 decades in teaching, but yeah, mostly GCSE language at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was literature that you sort of dipped into as well, because obviously in this game that we're about to play, things like 1984 and Crime and Punishment and things like that are going to crop up. So I was wondering, am I up against a bit of a master? We've got a bit of a novice in myself here.
I've always been passionate about English, so I've always been a prolific reader of the classics and the non-classics. But now we'll talk a little bit about literature, but mostly about football, I think. So we'll be on the same page. Fantastic.
Right, so let's get into this game then. So, listeners, we're about to play a game that I've loosely called the Football Fictional Fan Club, the Triple FC, just adding a bit of a C on the end there, and it's basically. Tony and I have picked 5 characters and we're going to try and imagine and talk about and come up with who we believe those characters would support if they had a football team to support. So just a little bit of fun. Hopefully, guys, if you want to kind of join along in your heads and think about who these teams, who you think they would support as well, that'd be great. And, message in the comments section would be fantastic as well. But, yeah, Tony, you ready for it?
I'm ready whenever you are, mate.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the first character that we're going to go with is my choice, and it's Rodion Raskolnikov. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that dodgy, but yeah, my Russian's not brilliant. So for everyone that doesn't know, Rodion Raskolnikov is a character from Crime and Punishment. He's a young, impoverished student who thinks killing someone off in order to inherit their money is a great idea, until they realise that the guilt, paranoia and confusion gets a little too much.
I'm not going to attempt to correct your Russian because I'm an English teacher and not a Russian teacher, but and I really hate to do this to you so early on in the game, Simon, but I'm going to go for Arsenal.
Okay.
You're nodding almost as if you anticipated that. Just to explain the reasons why, and I suppose it's quite topical as we're making this broadcast. Sorry, Simon, but Arsenal are bottom of the league with the Premier League with no points at the moment. And like you said, I think the story, I did read it a long time ago, and there was a very good BBC production with the great John Hurt playing the role of Raskolnikov. And I think he kills his landlord.
Yes,
not
that's
quite
correct.
sure about that. But yeah, the punishment bit, so that's the crime. And the punishment bit, I think there's a detective chasing him all the way through the book, and he never quite manages to pin the murder on him. But the punishment is his conscience and the terrible guilt and the suffering and so on. So I got thinking that Arsenal kind of killed off the great Arsene Wenger, didn't they? And towards the end, there seemed to be a great body of opinion that said Wenger's gone the full course now, we don't want him anymore. And then since then, you've had Unai Emery and now Arteta. And I think the punishment's kicking in, isn't it? I wonder whether or not you can tell me better as an Arsenal fan, but whether you're now getting the punishment and whether you almost kind of feel, we should never have let Arsenal go. I've even seen things on phone-ins today, or heard things on phone-ins about Wenger coming back until the end of the season as a kind of quick fix to get them out of the mess that they're in at the moment. So, yeah, my choice was Arsenal. What did you go for?
I mean, first of all, I just want to say, why do you think I'm wearing a football shirt that isn't an Arsenal one? But
yeah, sorry, I've outed you as an Arsenal fan there very early on, haven't I?
No, it's fine. It's I think the club that I went for was actually PSG, so I can totally understand why you went for Arsenal. But I just think, almost similar to sort of Man City in a sense, but it was with a bit more of a greed aspect. So I think a lot of the PSG fans, given that they're sort of based in the capital, and they kind of wanted their club to have a little bit more investment. So you can kind of say it was a little bit like Raskolnikov, where they wanted to kill the sort of little PSG club and then sort of go on to bigger things, what they thought were bigger things. But I mean, there must be some PSG fans that are loving it right now, but a little bit like Man City in a sense, where it's become so artificial, it's become almost like a computer game. Are they really invested? Are those original fans of the small, real football club, are they really invested in what's happening now? So I think a lot of that, the guilt and a lot of the being able to not relate as much as they possibly were before, maybe that's the sort of punishment they're enduring at the moment. But I think your Arsenal analogy kind of works a bit better, because it's certainly punishment at the moment, I tell you. But I would like to say we're only 3 games in. I think a lot of people are getting carried away massively at the moment. It's only 3 games in. If you listen to most, it's almost like we know who's going to win the league, who the top scorer is, and who's getting relegated. It's just 3 games. So, calm down.
They're clearly not going to finish bottom any more than Tottenham are going to finish top, are they? But are you a little bit concerned? I know it's the first time they haven't made Europe for since the start of the Wenger regime, isn't it? So are you a little bit concerned, even though, as you rightly say, it's early days?
I am concerned with the transfers that we've made, because there's a lot of money that's been spent on essentially a B team, so that concerns me. But I think a lot of the reason why we haven't played that well, or why we've got up to a bad start, bar the Brentford game, we should have given a hell of a lot more of a showing in that. But I think the reason why is because we played Man City and we played Chelsea, who are definitely going to contend for the title this season. Although it might be very early to say, they're going to be up there, no doubt about it. And they are massively strong teams, so we're always going to lose those. I think it was going to be a miracle if we actually got anything out of those games. And we're missing some key figures. We're missing Thomas Partey, who is huge for us. Although he didn't play that great last season, but he's still a massive key figure for us. And Yeah, our right back situation is an absolute mess. We've got about 5 right backs, but none of them are decent enough for a mid-table Premier League team at the moment. So it's a bit of a dodgy situation at the moment. But I think, give it a bit of time, have those key figures come back in. I think we'll be all right. Maybe top 6 is probably realistic for our aspirations this season, but yeah, I think we'll be fine. I don't think we'll get relegated. There's a meme going around that Aaron Ramsdale, because he's played for, I think, every club that he's played for, he's got them relegated. So obviously that one's doing the rounds at the moment.
In fairness to him, he's a very good goalkeeper. So just coming back to your choice of PSG as well, and crime and punishment, I think the punishment for PSG now is the kind of pressure that they're going to be under, and they're going to win the French league, aren't they? It's a gimme, isn't it? But if they don't win the Champions League with Messi, I'm not sure whether Mbappe's staying. There's talk of him going to Real Madrid at the moment, and Neymar. There was even talk of Ronaldo coming in at one point. Imagine a forward line with some combination of Neymar, Messi, Mbappe, and Ronaldo. Wow. But I think be careful what you wish for, because if they don't win the league, even if they were beaten finalists, that would be considered a failure, isn't it? So I think if we do look at them as the crime and the punishment, the crime is a ludicrous amount of money they've got compared to other French teams, and the punishment is the pressure that puts you under. Not so much in your domestic league, but in the Champions League.
Do you think they'd consider it a failure even if they don't win the Champions League, or even if they don't get to the Champions League final?
I personally think so. Yeah, if you bring in Messi alongside, what they've already got, even if Mbappe were to go, I think a Neymar Messi forward line. Admittedly, Messi perhaps at the other side of his powers, but there's a reason why they're bringing in that kind of quality, isn't it? It's not to do with winning the French league, because they could probably win that with their second string 11.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting one. But your choice, my friend, what's your one?
Yeah, so my first choice was Winston Smith. You mentioned briefly George Orwell's 1984 in passing. I'm sure people are familiar with the whole Big Brother is Watching You and the very famous classic novel of George Orwell. So Winston Smith is the sort of everyman who is frustrated by the fact that there's so much totalitarian power in the place where he lives, and he kind of tries to resist and tries to break it and tries to get into a sort of active movement to stop it. So who do you think Winston Smith would support?
This is a bit left field, and I know we sort of said on the build-up to this that we were going to stick within England, and I have stuck within England, but I haven't stuck within the English Football League. I've gone outside of it a bit more. So I've gone with FC United of Manchester. The reason why I've done that is that, Winston's kind of living within the system of the Thought Police, brackets Man United, and it wasn't working, so he sort of broke out and joined a more liberal, less oppressive organisation, the Brotherhood. However, he can't escape the force of Big Brother, so inevitably he finds himself supporting Man United whether he likes it or not. So.
I think that's a brilliant choice. How familiar are people out there with the whole FC United sort of breakaway?
I don't think there's many that are that sort of aware of it in Holland, unless they've seen the film Looking for Eric, but I'm not so sure. But I think it's not a major concept, but maybe it's coming a bit more to light as we, especially after the European Super League and things like that. Maybe it's coming into people's consciousness a bit more, but no, it's not. It's not massive over here, but it's a big thing in England, I imagine, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, locally, I hate to say I haven't been to an FC United game yet, but I should really, I don't bother going to Old Trafford anymore. I gave up long ago. I still watch the odd game on Sky, but I'm not quite as invested as I used to be. So maybe I'm actually thinking of watching United women, but they're not letting the spectators in just yet. Although they are going on Sky TV, they're on Friday night. But yeah, I think that was a brilliant choice. I'm surprised the Mancunian it didn't dawn on me that would be Winston Smith's choice. But I toyed with the idea of Leicester City. Obviously for the fact that they won an unexpected Premier League, but Winston Smith actually fails ultimately. He betrays Julia because he's terrified of rats, and he says do it to her, and the very last line of 1984 is he loved Big Brother. And Leicester of course didn't fail. Leicester did manage to lift the silverware against all the odds. So in the end I went for Burnley, because I feel that Burnley are really kind of overachieving for the amount of money that they spend. And you get yo-yo clubs, don't you, who come up and down. Sheffield United have done it, Bournemouth have done it, Norwich have done it a few times. West Brom as well, but Burnley seem to have somehow, I don't know quite how many years, but they seem to have managed to sustain. They've flirted with relegation, and some seasons they've been relatively mid-table. I think they play decent football as well under Sean Dyche without ever really bringing in any big-name players. So, and I actually hate to say this, I've watched Burnley over the last couple of games. They got a draw with Leeds United and they lost to Liverpool and played some really excellent football and certainly deserved to get something at Anfield. But ultimately, they just didn't have the finishing power, and Mo Salah pops in a brilliant goal. So I actually think, like Winston Smith, I hate to say it, but I think Burnley are going to ultimately fall short, and this might be the season that it happens. Sorry, Burnley fans, but fair play to them in the same way that Winston Smith took on Big Brother. Burnley have taken on the Big Brothers of the Premier League, and so far have succeeded. Will probably prove me wrong again this season.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I personally think they'll be okay. I think they usually have sort of a dodgy start. It takes them a while to sort of get up to speed, and I think they'll eventually start kicking. The usual faces will, make big impressions for them, because I think Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes, when they're, firing for them, they'll be fine.
Tim Pope in goal, which could be quite a key thing. Sorry, Nick Pope, not Tim Pope. Nick Pope is in goal, isn't he? So top class goalkeeper, that can sometimes make a big difference if you're scrabbling for every point.
Yeah, definitely. So should we go on to my next one?
Yeah.
Which is Dr. Evil. Obviously, Dr. Evil, the tyrannical dictator hell-bent on global domination, who takes on Austin Powers, which I won't give a spoiler alert, but it's keep that name in mind, obviously. Who did you go for Dr. Evil's club?
Well, I've gone for Paris Saint-Germain for this one. Again, we're talking at a point where they've just brought in Lionel Messi, and at the moment they've got the most ludicrous forward line. When Ronaldo was available, it was basically only the two Manchester clubs or Paris Saint-Germain who were going to be able to pay his wages. So where they remind me a little bit of Dr. Evil is that wanting to take over the world and wanting to be the supreme superpower, and they've got the kind of money so far ahead of all the other French league teams that they just struck me as this. If I'm looking for one, that there's, to some extent, Man City have dominated financially in the English Premier League, haven't they? And you could find the sort of Real Madrids of this world in Spain. But I just think the French league is one where, to a certain extent, you could say the same about Bayern Munich, who actually thought about, but went for Paris Saint-Germain in the end. I think at the end of the day, when you've got Messi playing alongside Neymar and Mbappe, and then you're thinking of bringing in Ronaldo as well, it just seems to be a club that's intent on world domination. Who did you go for Dr. Evil?
Given that they were heavily involved and they were basically the sort of main instigators behind the European Super League, there was basically one step towards football global domination, in my sort of opinion. So, I went for Real Madrid. There's something about that sort of royal dynasty that Real Madrid kind of has, and there's almost something Dr. Evil about I've forgotten his name. Is it Perez? Florentino Perez? There's almost something super uber villain about him. So that was the only choice that I could go for, really.
I think historically as well, if you look at Real, like you say, the Real means royal, doesn't it? But there was a point where they were very closely associated with fascism, wasn't they? And
Franco's reign.
Franco's regime wanted to be powerful in Europe, so they ploughed loads. Even more recently, I remember there was a point where they supposedly had huge financial problems, and everybody thought they were going to flounder. And then they suddenly brought in Luis Figo, the Portuguese player, who was probably the outstanding player in the world, certainly in Europe. And the story was that the Madrid government or the Spanish government bought the stadium off them and then gave it them back for nothing. So it suddenly released a load of funds that they couldn't really lay their hands on. So there is something slightly sinister about the way Real Madrid have been allowed to conduct their operations over several decades.
Yeah, definitely. There's and I just think as well with that sort of involvement in the ESL. And just the way that Perez had kind of tried to wash his hands clean of any involvement in it, and then also say that, it's always going to go ahead because, we're so sort of far down the line with what sort of, been sort of agreed and everything with all the other clubs. it was kind of it seemed like a sort of sinister, almost Donald Trump kind of threat to the rest of those clubs that were involved. So it's dodgy club.
Mentioned Leicester before. It's not quite on the same scale, but I suppose, like me as a neutral, you're really rooting for Atletico Madrid to win La Liga, which they did last year. Anybody but Barcelona and Real Madrid is always good news.
I've got a mate that's a Sevilla fan, so I'm backing them all the way.
All right, yeah. Things are starting to be a bit more competitive in Spain, aren't they? We were talking about how PSG and Bayern Munich just automatically run away with the league every year. But a few of the Spanish teams are coming into the frame lately.
Yeah, which is quite funny. Did you see, is it Pellegrini, the former Man City manager, he's the manager of Real Betis, and he came out with some comments the other day where he said La Liga is almost one of the worst leagues in Europe at the moment because it's so slow and there's not much physicality to it and everyone rolls around on the grass. So I thought it was very very brave comments to make because it's probably going to get him in a bit of hot water. But
just going to say it's a pity Jack Grealish didn't go there.
Yeah, he flourished.
If you're interested in coming on the show for an Under the Floodlights special to talk about your favourite player or manager, please email the FFF2021@gmail.com or DM the FFF84 on Twitter. All contact details will be in the episode description. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the FFF.
So I've gone for Marvin the Paranoid Android from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. If anyone's not familiar with it, one of my favourite characters in literature. And there's an idea of building robots, building androids with human personalities. So they basically give Marvin, this paranoid android, this very depressed personality. It's got some of the best lines of all time. My favourite line, I'm going to use this one when I retire, which I'm not too far away now. And there's a scene where Marvin, who's got the brain the size of a planet, but all he ever asks him to do is pick up pieces of paper. And he's been a car park attendant for 30 million years. And somebody says, "Oh my God, what was that like?" And he says, "The first 10 million was the worst. The second 10 million, that was also the worst. And as for the third 10 million, I didn't enjoy that at all." So, life, don't talk to me about life. Loathe it or ignore it, you can't like it. He's just full of all these absolutely brilliant little aphorisms about being depressed. So I got to thinking, which particular team is suffering a lot from depression at the moment? Don't worry, I'm not going to mention Arsenal again. And I thought about, I don't know if you saw the documentary Sunderland Till I Die. There was a couple of documentaries, and to be fair, there was a season when they got relegated under Chris Coleman. And for every quite optimistic and upbeat supporter, there seemed to be a Sunderland fan who was quite depressed. But I didn't go for Sunderland in the end. I just moved a little bit further along in the northeast and I went for Newcastle United. Because I think, to be fair, they've probably got reasons to complain at the moment with the Mike Ashley regime, and they've been desperate to get rid of him. But I listened to a lot of phone-ins, and they always seem to be full of Newcastle United supporters bemoaning the terrible team and the fate, and wondering whether this might be the season they go down. And I heard a journalist talking about Steve Bruce the other day and said, the thing with Steve Bruce, if Newcastle play crap, he gets all the stick. But if they get a good result, he doesn't seem to get any of the credit. And that kind of made me think that there was a bunch of Marvin the Paranoid Androids in there. We still call it St James's Park, don't we, for football fans? So, and I love Newcastle, I love the people of Newcastle, but I do kind of feel, perhaps for quite valid reasons, they're the ones who are complaining a lot at the moment, more than any other fans that I know. Who did you go for?
I went for Derby County, just because I think, they're a club that hasn't left the Championships since 2008, which I think is the longest any club has featured in one league in England forever. I think it's the longest record. So the ownership troubles, transfer embargoes, a manager that's in tabloids for a lot of the wrong reasons, and the last time they were in the league, they scored the record lowest points tally. So for me, that's enough to give you heavy bouts of depression.
Yeah. No. I think probably just not quite hear as much of the Derby fans as the Newcastle fans, because Newcastle's more of a story that people are familiar with, isn't it? Yeah. Do you think a lot of it's about the team that you support, and you always kind of feel as if it's another team's supporters who are moaning, and you tend to ignore the negativity of your own supporters, or is it the other way around? You tend to notice the negativity towards your own team more?
Ever since I started doing this podcast, I never really sort of ventured that much into territories of other clubs, but because I've started doing this, I've had to join sort of Facebook pages and groups and whatnot, and it is. I think that there are slight differences, especially with Arsenal. It seems a bit more toxic. It seems a bit more whiny. And I think there's, for an example, I see and I read a lot of the stuff about Celtic and in St. Pauli. A lot of it is it's still about being proud to be a Celtic fan. It's still about being proud of the performances on the pitch, but they still give an honest opinion and feedback of how they thought they played absolutely shit sometimes. But it's with Arsenal, it just seems to be, maybe it is just like you say. Maybe it's because I'm a fan, and for me, the first thing I think is whiny complaints, and it's maybe that's just what I sort of see introspectively as an Arsenal fan. But I don't know. It's hard to tell.
A lot of it's about home and away games, isn't it? They always reckon that supporters who invest and go to away games are always getting behind the team, regardless of how bad they're playing. But Roy Keane's prawn sandwich brigade at Old Trafford, they come along, more ready to moan than to cheer and support, kind of thing. Also, it depends how your team's doing. So I can understand perfectly well why Arsenal are getting on Arteta's back at the moment. But a year ago, I probably would have said West Ham United. West Ham used to always be on the phone-ins, and they seem to have the most whinging fans. But because West Ham are flying at the moment and playing really good football, then understandably that's gone away. So I suppose we're doing this in the context of two teams who are struggling at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a term that's sort of derived from YouTube sort of fan TV, and it's Banter FC. So whoever seems to get the Banter FC buck, it's usually Arsenal for a lot of the time. But when clubs, I think Chelsea have had it, Man United have had it at times, when they're the ones that sort of be taking up most of the tabloids, and they're the ones that are in the back pages for most of the time. That's when they've got that Banter FC label on their name. And it's nice when your team sort of strings 3 or 4 wins together, and then you can kind of put that Banter FC label to a side. But it's a bit annoying. I think Arsenal are probably going to be flying that flag for quite a lot this season. I've got a feeling.
Just going back to Newcastle, I think it's nailed on that Arsenal are going to finish above Newcastle. So do you think Newcastle have got reasons to be a little bit wary this year? Do you think they are relegation candidates?
Ooh. I mean, where did they finish last season? Do you remember?
Sort of lower half, I think, but they had a couple of good results towards the end, didn't they? Bruce did sort of have a bit of a spring.
I think Joe Willock was a fantastic revelation.
Joe Willock's
but he hasn't seemed to have got off to a flyer as much as he did last season. So I don't know, maybe that's just not going to pay off. But I think that sort of style of Steve Bruce is pretty much relegation fodder, isn't it? I hate to say it, but it's he's. I think I'm right. Am I right in saying that he's the manager that's been relegated the most in the Premier League?
Could well be. I couldn't confirm that, but I'm pretty sure he's had a few bad seasons. I love watching Alan Saint-Maximin though. He's absolutely superb. Not always got the end product, but absolutely sensational to watch.
Him and his Gucci headband. He's a very, very good footballer. So the next one, which is Homer Simpson. A lovable. Right. Well, I was about to explain, but I'm pretty sure everyone in the world knows who Homer Simpson is.
I'd love to hear how you describe it.
Yeah, okay. A lovable yet dim-witted family man who finds himself in unfortunate circumstances on a regular basis. He's a working-class hero who suffers from laziness, ignorance and addiction, but his heart and his loyalty is most definitely in the right place.
I went for a really left field one here, and I left the UK for the first time. Sorry, not the first time. I've had Paris Saint-Germain. I went for 1864 Munich.
Wow.
And there's a little bit of anecdote behind this one. My son once studied in Munich in between his degree, and he had a birthday while he was out there. So me and his older brother went out to Munich for 10 days, had a really fantastic holiday there. And we went to the Allianz Stadium, and you could either do a Bayern Munich Allianz tour or a Munich 1864 one. And the day before, we'd been on a beer tour where somebody took you down all the various Munich pubs and told you about the different types of beer, and then you could sample them all. And the guy, lovely guy, called Carl with a K, and he was a massive 1864 Munich fan, and he was saying Bayern Munich is just a bit like we said about Paris Saint-Germain, sort of swanning around, being so kind of self-important. And he said 1864 is a much better team to support, and it's more real and it means something to people, and we're much more passionate about it. And the Saturday morning, 1864 Munich, or the Saturday afternoon, 1864 1864 Munich were playing at home in the Allianz. And as we were walking to the train station, it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and everybody was sinking the big steins of beer. And, there was no trouble. And as far as I can gather, there tends to not be trouble at German football games, and the rival fans tend to mix quite a lot. So I could really see Homer Simpson in that whole scenario. The idea of him sort of swinging the pints with his mates and going to watch the game, and then of course he's totally enthralled to Mr. Burns, isn't he? And Mr. Burns is the all-important figure, the kind of multimillionaire who owns the nuclear power station. So I kind of saw Bayern Munich in that sort of role, and Homer Simpson. So it's very anecdotal, that one, but it took me a long time to decide on Homer. There's lots of teams we could have paired him with, but yeah, I've gone for quite an obscure choice, really.
No, that's a fantastic answer. That was definitely not a team that I was expecting you to say, but that was brilliant. For me, I've gone for Leicester City, just for, they're very much a family club, obviously with the ownership and everything, that's kind of breaking into the top six through more or less sheer positive energy and sort of willingness, and obviously a lot of intelligence in terms of their sort of recruitment. But much like Homer's sort of typical regular blunders, Leicester just kind of fall at the last hurdle, which they have done in the last 2 or 3 seasons. So it's I kind of saw that relation there as well.
There's a great episode where a character can't quite understand how Homer Simpson has got such a lovely family and such a fantastic house, and he's kind of working really hard, and he talks about Homer Simpson being this typical American who seems to land on his feet. So I suppose Leicester have kind of somehow done it against all the odds, haven't they, in a way that Homer always manages to get by, despite stupidity and alcoholism. And like you said, one of the things about The Simpsons is the warmth of the family. Craig Cash and Caroline Aherne wrote a sitcom called The Royal Family about a very working class family in Manchester. I remember them saying they absolutely adore each other, but they would never say it. And I think that's also true of The Simpsons, isn't it? There's a real sort of adoration between them, even though there's lots of kind of infighting. And you're right, the Leicester chairman who got killed in the helicopter crash, and there's still massive warmth, isn't there, towards him, or he got killed in a crash, didn't he? And there's still that massive warmth that really kind of came out when they won the FA Cup, and when they won the Championship against all of the Premiership against all the odds. So I can see Homer in that role.
Yeah.
What was the reaction to Leicester City? Were you in Netherlands when they kind of won the Premier League against all those odds? Were people around Europe invested in what was going on?
No, I wasn't there. I've only moved here about a year and a half ago, so it was at least 3 or 4 years before I came here. But I imagine, I don't know, the feeling that I had, it was just internationally kind of revered, because it was just such a massive miracle for it to ever have happened. I think that the fact there were 1,000 to 1 on the odds, it was just absolutely insane. But I can't imagine. I mean, a lot of people sort of mentioned it to me. I have had it a few times over here, and it's like, a lot of people have kind of mentioned the Leicester City thing, so I think it definitely still has an impact globally. So it's good to know that, really.
Still almost unbelievable, isn't it, that it could happen? I don't know exactly when it will happen. I think Leicester will compete this season, but they certainly won't be challenging. I think Chelsea City probably, particularly for the title. United maybe, depending on how the Ronaldo experiment works out, but certainly not on the evidence of the last 2 lots of 90 minutes that I've seen United play.
Yeah.
But, like you said about Arsenal, it's early days. We're not quite sure how things are going to shape up yet, are we?
I think as well, just underdogs from all over the world, they see that as a template and as an example, that it is possible. So I think that definitely has had an impact internationally.
There was talk about it being a Hollywood film, wasn't there? I don't know whether that's still on. Matt Damon playing Jamie Vardy or whatever it may be. Yeah. And also, the really odd thing was Ranieri getting sacked so soon after winning it. It shows how far loyalty goes, doesn't it? Everybody was expecting there to be a statue erected of him, and next thing you know, he was on his bike, wasn't he? And, Yeah,
I wonder if they would make a film of that achievement. That would be great. I wonder if they would include Jamie Vardy's, what was it, Porto or Port Vimto shots he used to have before games. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah, it does ring a bell. Yeah. There was also the whole pizza thing, wasn't there? And the ding-a-dong-dong with the bell. Lots of quite quirky little stories. I absolutely love Ranieri.
He's a great guy.
That will certainly make him go down in history, but just such a lovable character, isn't he?
Absolutely.
So I've gone for Miss Havisham. I thought we should have at least one female character. You have as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
In a minute. But Miss Havisham from Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. And if anybody doesn't know the story, she basically was jilted at the altar many, many years ago, but she's never quite been able to accept it. And when Pip goes round, she's still wearing the wedding dress, even though it's going yellow. There's still balloons everywhere. The cake's gone completely hard, the wedding cake, but it's still there, literally in tears. So it's very much a woman who is very regretful of the past and that things never really happened, but she's still sort of clinging with her fingernails to the fact that, you know, something glorious might still happen. And this guy who jilted her at the altar, God knows how many years ago, will suddenly see the error of his ways and come and sweep her up in his arms. But obviously, as a reader, you know it's never going to happen. So, what did you go for, Simon?
For me, I couldn't think of any other team, and I had to go for my beloved Arsenal. I just thought 100% an Arsenal fan, just clinging on to glorious days gone by, and you know, just more or less nothing but a decrepit old shell of the past. It's just, for me, you know, almost in a way that the sort of the jilted wedding day was almost like the 2006 Champions League final, because so many of Wenger's greats, Pires, Lauren, Ashley Cole, Sol Campbell, Reyes, all of those players left after that Champions League final. So it was almost like Arsenal, Miss Havisham was, you know, left to pick up the pieces, and you could say that was more or less the beginning of the decline after that. So yeah. In
fairness, it's not that long since Arsenal won a major trophy. They beat Chelsea in an FA Cup final.
Yeah, but it's not quite the same as Champions League, though, is it?
No. And, you know, up until the current season, they've been qualifying for Europe and particularly the Champions League, haven't they? A couple of flirts with the Europa. So I'd go back a little bit further, because I think, you know, Miss Havisham seems to be going back to the year dot. A couple of years ago, I would have chosen Liverpool, but obviously they've kind of turned that around, although even Liverpool were winning Champions Leagues when they were still desperate to try to win a Premier League. So I went across Stanley Park and went for Everton, because Everton haven't won a major trophy since they beat United in an FA Cup final in 1995. So, you know, we're talking about, there always used to be a big thing about the fact United hadn't won the league for 25, 26 years until they finally managed to turn it round. But nobody seems to make quite the big thing about Everton not winning a title for 25, 26 years. And I kind of feel a bit unlucky historically, because there was a great team that I remember with Gary Lineker playing for them and Duncan Ferguson, and you know, they had an absolutely superb team. And it kind of more or less coincided with the Heysel disaster when English teams weren't allowed in Europe. So Everton must have been absolutely gutted that they missed out on playing in Europe because of Liverpool for a couple of seasons, and by the time the English teams were let back in. And I don't think they've really particularly excelled. They've had good players and they've had decent sides, but I think it's a long time since Everton, who were, you know, arguably a very, very big club, have really kind of competed for the top honours. So I saw them as the Miss Havisham, because I think they've been waiting for something to happen a bit longer than Arsenal or a few other teams I could mention, Tottenham.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah. I mean, there are other clubs that you could kind of put in that template as well, because I think Ipswich Town, because I think did they win the European? Was it the Champions League equivalent? Or
they never won the big trophy. I think they won. Would it have been called a Cup Winners' Cup back then? I think. That team with Alan Brazil and Paul Marino.
It was when Bobby Robson was the manager, wasn't it? Yeah.
Bobby Robson was manager. Yeah, they won an FA Cup. They beat your lot in an FA Cup final. Sorry to keep talking about Arsenal defeats all the time.
Nottingham Forest was another one as well, obviously with Cloughy and you know, winning. That was the Champions League equivalent, wasn't it? They won. Yeah. So.
Would you agree that Everton have underachieved for a long time, though? You don't go back as far as beating the really top Everton teams.
I mean, what was the last sort of major trophy that they won then?
The FA Cup in '95. To beat United, and you know, United probably should have won that one player for player, but Everton won one.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, when it sort of springs to mind, I just think of David Moyes, and I think, you know, before he left for Man United, the things that he achieved for Everton were zero, but there was a feeling of positivity. What he'd done at Everton was fantastic, and he, you know, got them there and thereabouts, but they achieved zero. So it was almost like Pochettino in a sense, where everything was fantastic for Tottenham, but there was nothing to show at the end of it. So yeah, perhaps with Everton they just haven't quite had it in them to sort of go that final mile, and I think that's that's always been a little bit of their downfall.
You think Rafa Benitez will work? Obviously, he's going to be under a lot of pressure if he doesn't. But they've started well. They've started this season well, and he's got, he's won the Champions League with Chelsea, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't he? So he's a winner.
I think they could go under the radar and do quite well. I don't think they'll challenge for the title, obviously, but I think they'll be there and thereabouts for Europe. But yeah, we'll see. I think Rafa's possibly maybe just on par with Carlo Ancelotti in terms of his pedigree as a manager. So maybe they'll have a similar season where they'll go really far up until the sort of last 10 games and then fall off the cliff. So we'll see.
David Moyes' story's been interesting, hasn't it? Because he did well at Preston, and as you say, he was absolutely loved at Everton, wasn't he? Obviously flopped terribly at United, although his results weren't as bad as some of the subsequent managers in retrospect. But I think I'm right in saying West Ham sacked him and then he came back, and now West Ham are absolutely flying, aren't they? So you rate him as a manager?
It's funny as well. What springs to mind was it Real Sociedad, where he was over in Spain as well? That was a kind of a flash in the pan and flash in his face as well. It just really didn't work out at all. But I think if you sort of add that, especially with his Man United error that he had as well, it's fantastic what he's doing. And I think, with West Ham, for some reason, it's just an absolute joy of chemistry where it's all sort of come together and it just seems to be working. I don't know what it is and why they're doing so well, but maybe there's just the right sort of personnel there, right kind of players that just really buy into his philosophy. And Mikel Antonio just seems to be an absolutely player possessed, because I kind of thought going into this season they're really going to miss Lingard, but it doesn't seem like they miss him at all. And I think that Ben Rama guy exactly. They had him there for sort of half a season last season, but he didn't really make the impact that he's doing now. But he's definitely stepped into Lingard's shoes, and I think he's going to be a player and a half for him.
As an outsider, Simon, because I grew up watching Man United, but why do you think it didn't work with Moyes? Because it seemed an obvious fit, and Ferguson saw him as his legacy, didn't he? So, is it just simply a case of following Ferguson was always going to be impossible?
Possibly. I mean, David Moyes, for me, and I'm pretty sure I spoke to a lot of friends as well, I think they more or less would have made the same decision and just would have gone for Moisey as well. Just that sort of the personality, the sort of Scottish relationship that United have. I just thought it was just a perfect sort of fit in terms of a lot of things. And it was just strange how it just sort of didn't work out at all. I
think there was two key factors. I think, first of all, obviously no United fan will ever have a bad word for Ferguson, but he left an ageing squad that was in decline. Paul Scholes had been brought out of retirement and just about did enough, but was, on his last legs, Ryan Giggs. We had, and I think the second thing is he didn't really have the sort of pull to get big players in. They were talking about Gareth Bale and all sorts of world-class players, and then he just brought in Marwan Fellaini, who never really worked out anyway. So I think the combination of inheriting a team that was very much on the wane and not having the sort of the personality and the charisma to attract really top players was his downfall, really.
I think you'll obviously know this a lot more than I will, but I think the relationship between Ferguson and David Gill was such a huge one for United, and I think David Gill departed just before Moyes came in, so I think that was a huge factor behind it as well.
Very good point. Yeah, we saw just what an important element he was in the club, really. Everybody knew Ferguson was going, but people didn't pay quite so much attention to that.
And I think the less said about Ed Woodward, the better, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's move on. Or the Glazers, that's yeah. Quite right when people started to say now there was all these protests at Old Trafford about how terrible the Glazers were, but once they start bringing in Sancho and Varane and even Ronaldo, then suddenly it's all forgotten about, which is probably something in that.
Yeah, definitely. So Han Solo. For those that don't watch Star Wars, so God knows what you're doing with your spare time, but yeah, a charming and free-spirited smuggler who sort of lives by his own code. He's one of the leaders of the Rebel Alliance. He wants nothing more than to prevail over the dark side and the Empire. So, I mean, who did you go for?
This time I did go for Leicester City. So, as I was saying, the reason Winston Smith didn't quite fit with Leicester is because he ultimately failed, but of course Leicester ultimately succeeded. And you just said it yourself there about the Rebel Alliance and taking on the Dark Empire and all that type of thing. And And to me, I think you used the phrase free-spirited as well. All of that to me really captures what happened in the season that Leicester City managed to win the Premier League against all the odds. So I thought Leicester was a good fit for Han Solo.
Yeah, it's brilliant choice. I had to go for St. Pauli. Just sort of being the Pirates of football, and just for me, I don't think Han Solo would choose any other club really. I did, when I was sort of thinking the characters, I thought it would have been a bit too obvious if I went for Jack Sparrow, what would be in the sort of Pirates of the League. There would have been a bit too obvious. I think I would have been, kind of leading you to think of a football club. But yeah, I just think with Han Solo, he more or less is as much of a pirate, just without an eye patch and a wooden leg. But no, he's I couldn't think of any other club, to be honest.
Is Darth Vader HSV Hamburg?
Or Hansa Rostock, yeah.
Hansa Rostock.
Yeah. Take your pick. I think there's quite a few of them in the Zweite Bundesliga.
You won't be surprised to know I've got a St. Pauli fan in here somewhere, but I didn't go for the same one as you, so come on to that one in a second, yeah. So Austin Powers, I'm sure everybody knows what Austin Powers is. Well, we had Dr. Evil before,
yes,
didn't we? And Austin Powers is a sort of spoof James Bond, played by Mike Myers, and he's the sort of suave, sophisticated lady killer about town. Very much a spoof on James Bond, isn't it? But a very kind of comic take on James Bond. So, what club would you have Austin Powers supporting?
Bit of a left field one, but I've gone for QPR. Just had to go for a team sort of based in West London, as I just can't really sort of imagine him based anywhere else in the world. But also because QPR, they kind of had that sort of brief moment in the sun, which I'm trying to think which sort of period of time it was. Maybe sort of early 2000 or sort of late 2000s, early 2000 and teens. I don't know what you call that decade. But yeah, just sort of, that's where, with Tony Fernandez and that sort of investment that they had, it almost seemed, bringing in like Joey Barton and did they have Rio Ferdinand on their books at that point as well? I think maybe, or Anton Ferdinand. There was a few,
I think it was Anton,
yeah, Sean Wright Phillips, I think, was there as well, and they had quite a few sort of big name players, and it seemed like they were trying to take on the big bad boys of the Premier League. So for me, it just that kind of fit went there as well. And I think Austin often wears that sort of combination of white and navy blue, so that kind of made me think as well he'd be quite happy in that kind of white and blue hooped t-shirt. But
we're right in thinking Loftus Road is right next to the BBC, or was, I can't remember now. Wasn't it almost in the same postcode? I remember as a kid watching Blue Peter, and they'd always featured QPR whenever they featured football, and we kind of realised that it's the fact that they only had to take the cameras over the road, so they had a little bit of a sort of showbiz. But I go back as far as Jerry Francis and Stan Bowles. There was a very sort of sexy QPR team. I suppose it must have been the 1970s, where they had some, real absolute. Stan Bowles was a bit of a kind of George Best, Rodney Marsh type figure in the same kind of maverick style. So yeah, I remember some QPR teams with great affection. Yeah.
What team did you go for then?
So I went for. I went for Chelsea.
Okay.
I don't know my London geography as well as you, but I know that Chelsea's all that sort of swinging, the kind of cool characters and the wealthy characters and all that type of thing, and the sort of rich parties with champagne and cocaine and so on. So I could see Austin Powers with his cravat and his getting the girl and all that type of thing. I could see him fitting in with that whole swinging Chelsea scene, really.
I'm just trying to think to myself now, why on earth did I just bypass Chelsea? For some reason, that's just like a perfect fit. Because I was thinking as well, there must be a West London team, and obviously Chelsea are the most prominent West London team, but maybe it's just a sort of subconscious thing. I just hate Chelsea that much. I've just sort of erased them from my memory. But
Do you think they might be favourites to the league this year with Lukaku coming in?
It does seem to be a bit odd from the media how they're already deciding who's, kind of fighting for the title, and apparently Chelsea are. But I can kind of see where they're coming from. But I think with it's almost like Liverpool when they brought in Van Dijk, obviously completely different positions, but just that sort of transformative transfer. In a way, Lukaku for me seems because I think Werner was more or less their sort of out-and-out striker, and he's not really an out-and-out striker for them last season. So having that and adding that now to their personnel, is a scary prospect, and you can't really argue with them being strong. One of the strong favourites, because I mean, having Man City competing against them, and then you can't write off Liverpool either, and Man United with the sort of, obviously with Ronaldo and Sancho and what's the geezer's name from Real Madrid, Varane. Yeah, it's really hard to say. I'd say there's about 4 nailed-on favourites, if you can even say that. But it's going to be a very intriguing season this season.
I certainly think Thomas Tuchel's done a brilliant job as manager, because they were kind of not on the knees on the Lampard, but they weren't going nowhere fast, really, weren't they? Because nobody wanted Lampard to go because he's such a club legend. But Tuchel's certainly taken them on a few steps, hasn't he? And won the Champions League already, so he's already got money in the bank kind of thing, and he does seem to be a very shrewd operator to me.
I think Arsenal missed a step, because there was an opportunity for them to bring in Tuchel, and it was strange. A lot of people kind of, smirked at the idea of Tuchel as a decent manager, but I'm kind of glad in a way that it's proven people wrong, because in my opinion, he's a fantastic manager.
If you like football films, then come check out the Triple F Cinema, where I'm joined by guests, sometimes football fans, sometimes not, to review a specific football film. Give me 2 tickets to that football film right now.
See Chelsea more as a rival than Spurs. I sometimes think the Arsenal-Chelsea conflict is stronger, even though Spurs are more in the locality.
I think Chelsea are a rival to everyone. I think just with that sort of the Russian Abramovich money and just that being there, I don't think a lot of people like Chelsea, but a lot of people don't like Spurs either. So it's kind of pick your poison in a sense. It's not it's hard to say, but with the whole historic thing, Spurs are the immortal enemy. I don't think there's anyone more that we hate in a way.
I was going to ask you on the cultural basis as well. I don't know whether you're an Austin Powers fan because you picked Dr. Evil, but I'm more interested in the fact you seem to be a Star Wars fan.
I'm not a massive Star Wars fan, but I mean, who doesn't like Star Wars? I mean, it's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen much of the Disney stuff. I'm not too keen on that, but I'm more of a fan of the 4 to 6 trilogy. That's, can't beat it in my opinion. That's the absolute gold. But the other stuff I'm not too keen on. I was some of the recent stuff is just, I don't know, it just seems like churned out sort of money vehicles, to be honest.
I gave up long ago. I've loved the first film and some of the early ones, but I went to see Phantom Menace with my children at the cinema, and apart from the pod race, which is really spectacular, it absolutely bored the pants off me, so I've never really bothered too much, but I appreciate that there's reasons why people love it so much. Yeah.
My last one, Lisa Simpson. Obviously the daughter of Homer and Marge. She's the intelligent, kind and passionate about the planet and all things environmental. And she was essentially woke before it was even a term. So, what club do you think she'd support, Tony?
So everything that you've just said there told me that Lisa Simpson would be an FC St. Pauli fan. The idea of being woke before it was a thing. And, funnily enough, I identify quite a lot with Lisa Simpson, weirdly, because I came from a very working class environment in Salford, and nobody from my school ever used to pass the 11 plus and go to grammar school. And my brother actually went, but I was one of the first people to go to grammar school and then university. So, the fact that Lisa is kind of bucking the trend in terms of the fact, the family and everything. So I think, like you said, she's passionate about the environment. There's a lovely line when Marge Simpson says, "Why are you so upset, Lisa? Did the last of something die?" And that kind of that is Lisa Simpson in a nutshell, isn't it? And the fact that she does the tree hugging, and she's also the following something obscure. She's a big fan of jazz music, isn't she? And Bleeding Gums Murphy, this completely unknown jazz player, and all this type of thing. So everything about it told me that Lisa Simpson would be very much at home in the environment of the Milan Tour. St. Pauli, first team to have a creche in the stadium, the first club to start kicking people out for being racist. They kicked out a particular a lap dancing group who were doing very suspect things in the stadium in the private boxes. So there's a kind of passionate political left-wing ethos about FC St. Pauli, irrespective of the football, that I think Lisa Simpson would appreciate.
Yeah.
What about you?
I went for Forest Green Rovers. I just think, if I say Forest Green Rovers, are they actually Forest Green Rovers? Or it could just be Forest Green?
You name on me. It vaguely rings a bell, but you'll have to tell me more. You'll have to enlighten me.
So Forest Green or Forest Green Rovers, I'll have to look this up and correct myself if I've got it wrong. But they are the eco-friendly warriors of football. I'll put up a picture here so you can see of their stadium, which is basically made of wood and grass. It's just one of the most environmentally friendly football stadiums you will probably ever see. And they sell nothing but vegan food, which I wonder how that went down, because I've listened to a few sort of snippets on BBC Radio 5 Live and whatnot where they ask the fans. I think they've sort of slowly turned to it. But there's a lot of vegan food that you can get nowadays that would appease quite a few of the pucker pie eating fans that that go to football. Yeah. So for me, just for their sort of green fingers, if it were, in football, I just went for Forest Green.
Where do they play geographically and in terms of divisions?
Forest Green are playing in League One, I want to say, for England. I'm just going to look it up now. I should have done this research beforehand, really, shouldn't I? Yeah, it is Forest Green Rovers, so I got that right. They're in Gloucestershire, so and they are competing in League Two. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see Lisa fitting in there as well. Are you a Simpsons fan?
I love Simpsons. Yeah, there's a lot of shows and a lot of episodes that I've seen. I haven't seen possibly. Yeah, I'm on the minority side of, because I think there's a lot of episodes. Because they're still going on now, aren't they? I think they're still making episodes.
Yeah, I think the later ones seem to have lost some of the magic, but I'll still watch. Channel 4 over here still constantly repeats them, and I'll still watch some of the old episodes for the umpteenth time, because it's just so beautifully written.
Yeah, because I think they lost a lot of the sort of writing staff when they started to have that sort of turnover of the. Because I think what's his name, Conan O'Brien, he was sort of a big writer, and they had a few others as well. Ever since they sort of, those ones departed, I think the writing, you could sort of see it was a bit evident that it didn't quite have the original charm. But Do you know
there's an episode with Cristiano Ronaldo in? I've never actually seen it.
No, I haven't seen that one.
They bring in real people. Yeah, I think he does his own voice as well. So he's definitely achieved more than Lionel Messi. He's been in The Simpsons.
What's your favourite ever Simpsons episode?
That's a really good question. I love the B Sharp. It's a bit of a Beatles parody, where they're at this former barbershop quartet. There's a beautiful episode where it tells the same story from three different characters. So you can see the story from Homer's point of view, Lisa's point of view, and Bart's. So it's almost like a kind of avant-garde film that there's things you don't quite understand when you see it the first time, but then it starts to make sense. So I think that was, I know my favourite Simpsons lines. One is Marge Simpson. Homer said, "This is the worst party we've ever been to." And Marge says, "What about that New Year's Eve at Lenny's house? He didn't even have a clock." And there's a great line where they're arguing. Mo and Homer are arguing in the bar, and he says to Barney, show him the exit." And Barney looks absolutely horrified and said, "There's an exit?" And it's just full of absolutely beautiful one-liners. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
You started very highbrow with Crime and Punishment, so I'm going to finish very highbrow. I thought we should get Shakespeare in somewhere, so I've actually gone for Othello. If anybody doesn't know the story of Othello, he's an ageing black soldier who marries a much younger white girl called Desdemona. Yeah. And there's a character called Cassio who's jealous because he's been promoted ahead of him. So Cassio starts to put lots of doubt into Othello's mind that she's the most faithful and loving wife he could possibly have. But he manages to convince him that she's being unfaithful, and he keeps on putting all these ideas, and it ends up with, spoiler alert, but it ends up with Othello killing Desdemona and then committing suicide. So it's a play all about jealousy. So we're moving into slightly dodgy territory here, aren't we? So I got thinking about which football club would be absolutely steeped in jealousy and envy. But what did you go for?
I'm going to make a confession here because I didn't know too much about Othello. My sort of English lit focus was more or less on Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet and Macbeth.
How did you resolve that issue then?
But I just think I kind of went for Man City. I just think that his sort of original self represents the Man City pre the Sheikh Mansour sort of takeover, a time in which their sort of glory days were sort of full of upset and tears, but they were very much a true and sort of real football club. Sort of, if you could tell me more about Othello, how he was. Is that sort of mentioned in the story, how he was before Desdemona, or?
He was just he knew his way around the battlefield, and he was able to. He was a great soldier. The story's right at the start. Before you actually meet Othello, is to talk about how he's killed everybody in battle and he's fighting for his king and country and all that type of thing. What he can't cope with is the romantic world, that the kind of matters of the heart. Whereas as a soldier, he's all matters of the head. So that's the kind of his post-war decline really, and how he can't cope in that kind of environment. Is what the story.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. I just kind of got the impression that his head was kind of screwed on until, like you say, Desdemona sort of swooped in, and so in a way, Desdemona is almost like Sheikh Mansour, and then that I bet nobody said that before, and then there was sort of certain fans, there must be certain fans of Man City where they question the sort of genuine feel of their success right now. How artificial must it feel? I mean, in a sense, it could lead to these sort of negative outcomes in which Othello has suffered. But I do wonder, I mean, as well, obviously being in Manchester, you must know this more than I do, is like, how many City fans do you know that have kind of grumbled about it? I mean, obviously with the empty seats that we see in the Etihad, is that a reflection of that? Is that because City fans are just not quite on board?
City fans are just, I mean, bear in mind City was certainly competing with United in the late 60s and 70s and have had some very good teams over the decades since then. But obviously it's the last decade or so that they've if anything taken the upper hand. You probably remember Ferguson talking about the noisy neighbours and how we had to shut them up. But of course, the famous Aguero goal, City have always got that over United now. So I think the vast majority of City fans are more than happy that they're kind of seeing world-class players, week in, week out, and winning these titles and getting to go to European cities and so on. I do know a smaller element who have kind of got the feeling that they've now sold the heart and soul of the club and would prefer to be sitting in dodgy seats in Main Road, watching average teams maybe getting points off United every season. And I remember a time when a good season for City is that United didn't win anything, but clearly that's all changed now. And I think the vast majority, certainly a whole generation of City fans who don't know any different, they'll now have a certain sense of entitlement to be competing for all the big trophies. But I do know people in my kind of generation and sort of 10 years younger who have kind of lost interest in it. Same thing's happened to me with United to a great extent. Not to do with the fact that we don't keep winning everything. It's just, it just seems to be. This is why I switched to St. Pauli, and this is why I want to go and watch the women's team. You get a little bit more out. You can invest a little bit more in a club that means something to you. But at the end of the day, United might be signing Ronaldo to sell a couple million more shirts, and you just that side of it. I'm sure some City fans feel the same way. Yeah,
definitely. Which club did you go for then for Othello? So
this is an awkward one for me because I really picked Othello because of that whole jealousy thing, and I was really interested in the whole thing about who's most jealous of each other, and obviously there's been a United and City thing. Arsenal and Spurs still compete with each other. Even I might have gone for Everton because Liverpool have been winning a lot more locally. But I got to thinking about a team that you mentioned before, and I went for Ipswich Town.
Okay.
Because, as I say, I remember the days when Ipswich, like you said, were playing in European finals and had all those great players. The two Dutch lads in midfield, Arnold Meuren and Tyson, and they had Mariner up front, who was the English striker, Alan Brazil, who was the Scottish striker when that actually meant something. And like you say, Bobby Robson's management. And although Norwich are not exactly pulling up trees and winning all sorts of things, I think I'm right in saying Ipswich have now slipped down to League One. So I thought, if I was an Ipswich fan now, I'd be quite envious about the fact that Norwich are playing in the Premier League or, yo-yoing between the Championship and the Premier League. So it just struck me that's the only club I can think of, because the Sheffield clubs are not too far apart from each other, are they? The Bristol clubs are not a million miles apart. So it just struck me that the two clubs who are most in different regions, despite playing in the same kind of neck of the woods, is probably Ipswich and Norwich. So I might be wrong. there might be Ipswich fans who love going to watch Ipswich every week, but I would imagine they might be slightly envious of what's happening at Norwich.
No, because I've got a mate that I've known since the age of 5 and growing up, and he's a huge Ipswich fan. All of his family were. And back in those days, they were, sort of a big feature of the Premier League. I think they had, the times of sort of George Burley and whatnot as the manager, and Jim Magilton and whatnot. They had some really good days. I think there was a time where they actually came straight into the Premier League, and they might have got into Europe. I'm not entirely sure if I'm right on that, but they're almost a bit like Sheffield United when they had that first a couple of seasons ago. But yeah, ever since then they've just completely fallen off a cliff edge, and yeah, it's sad to see because as I was saying, I remember in those days Norwich City were always the inferior side, pretty much always the inferior side. So now to see Norwich, like you say, they're not having the best times in the Premier League, but when they're in the Championship, they're almost too good for it, but they're possibly not good enough for the Premier League. So it's but yeah, they're miles ahead of Ipswich at the moment. So it's yeah.
If you've gone down the jealousy route, who do you think you would have gone for? A club that's jealous of other teams or neighbours or whatever, but not necessarily in the UK anyway.
Well, I have to stick with UK because it's what I know the most, to be honest. But I was going to go with Portsmouth and Southampton, because I think, obviously, I think when Portsmouth were, the Harry Redknapp days and whatnot, they were doing quite well. I don't think Southampton were doing that well. So I think Southampton, they even went down to League One at one point, didn't they? They had a really mare of it. But now, obviously, it's the tables have turned. I'm not too sure where Portsmouth are. Are they in League One at the moment or League Two? I'm not.
Another 1 or 2, I can't remember now. No, but I do remember them in the top league as well. Yeah.
But yeah, I think when it comes to that that side of things, obviously Celtic and Rangers sort of springs to mind as well. So it's yeah.
Celtic at the moment, I think, last season, not just the fact that Rangers won the league, but the fact it was something ludicrous like 23, 24 points difference, wasn't it? Of course, Rangers beat Celtic yesterday as we're talking.
Yeah.
Rangers won 1-0 in the Old Firm derby. Yeah. Incidentally, did you know that the Ipswich and Norwich derbies were called the Old Farm derbies, which I've always loved? But of course, they haven't had any for a while, have they? Hence the choice of the Othello.
Yeah. No, it's it was really good. There was a really good choice actually for that Othello one because like I said, I don't know too much about Othello, and I just kind of went more on the aspect of because I think playing this game you can kind of think of a lot of teams that have had that sort of transformative sort of money investment, and it's almost like with PSG or with Man City. Almost Newcastle had it in the sense where you've got an idea of a club that you become so sort of enthralled with, and then even though it's an absolute shit show in terms of results on the football pitch, but there's something there, there's an identity there, and there's something you can really get on board with, even if the success is absent. But yeah, as soon as you have all of this oil money come in, it's you might get a lot of glory, but I mean, how much of it is really really worth it?
So we didn't get a single match,
no,
Simon?
Unfortunately not. I thought we would have got loads. I was actually looking at this thinking we would have got quite a few matches, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can see the logic in all the choices that you made. Perhaps perhaps it was unlikely we'd get a match.
We mentioned a lot of the same teams, just not for the same characters.
Yeah, Leicester cropped up, Saint Germain and Saint Paul. Yeah, a few of the same teams cropped up. Didn't they? Yeah. It was a fun game to play.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had a blast. Yeah, it was brilliant, mate.
Yeah,
but yeah, fantastic. So yeah, thanks again, Tony. And I'll.
No, always good fun. Always a pleasure.
Excellent. I'll look to get you on the show again soon.
Love to. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Simon.
Cheers, Tony. All the best.
Cheers. Thanks, Simon. Take care. Speak to you soon, mate.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Triple F. If you could please drop a like on our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter, that would be massively appreciated. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the Triple F.